Hello and welcome to What's in the Color of Rosé. Very, very important topic that is gaining a lot more importance in the last few years and relevance because a lot of countries are now producing rosé wines. We have New World country, every New World country that you can think of, Chile, Argentina, South Africa, America, Australia, New Zealand, pushing them as a very strong and firm offering of their portfolio of wines. And then we have the traditional countries, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, also now competing to bring out their rosé wines. As a result, there is a rosé wines has now made itself a kind of an entity of its own. It's a style that is respected, appreciated, and enjoyed in its uniqueness. And so the point is to bring out the color of rosé, which is quite vivid, quite contrasting. Unlike white and red wines, there is a big range of colors in rosés. There is the traditional pink, and then you have the salmon pink, onion pink, and then you've got the orange hues, and then you've got the ruby color, and then you also have the depth and the intensity, pale, medium, deep colors. What does a consumer look at, and does he or she or they look at the color to buy, or do they look and use their senses? How are the producers supposed to understand the consumer appeal here and to bring them something that they will also enjoy? Is color that important, or is it not? So fantastic debate discussion that we have 4 panelists. I'm one of the panelists, but I'm kind of chairing and moderating as well, because there is a lot that we can talk about, and I would love to hear as well from experienced industry professionals here. And hello to all the guests who've joined us. We have Nicola Thornton, who has introduced and got us all together. Thanks a lot, Nicola. And she she has her wine that she has given to the 4 of us are having her wine, Batos de Baro. And we are going to have another wine, paler contrast with her wines. So to start off with it, Charles, would you like to introduce yourself and then we go around?
Thanks, Sumi. Yes, I'm called Charles Metcalf. I have been talking, writing, filming about wine for rather longer than I care to remember, really. But I mean, over more than 30 years. I recently moved to Portugal with my wife. We love Portugal. We've written books about the wines of Portugal and come to that, the wines of Spain, as well as writing about wine and food matching, what wines to drink with what foods. And we finally bit the bullet and moved out of the UK just before the shutters of Brexit came down. I think I was on the last train through the Eurotunnel before the French shut it towards the end of December, on the 20th of December. And we're now living in Portugal very happily. It's not quite as warm as it might be. We've had some lovely, lovely, lovely weather, but today is a bit chilly, which is why I'm wearing a sweater. And I'm looking forward to I've got Nicola's wine, the Batos de Baro, and I've also got a Portuguese wine, which is called, it's the rosé from Quinta do Monte Douro, and slightly controversially perhaps, it's actually made from Syrah, but it's a lovely wine, and I'm looking forward to talking about it and comparing it and talking about the color.
Fantastic, Charles, and we look forward to the singing as well. I hope you have your rosé song ready. Liz, Gabby, Master of Wine.
Yes, probably writing rosé has rather taken over my life. Until 4 years ago, I didn't even like rosé. So writing a book about rosé was epiphany, revelation, and all of that. And I'm currently putting together an online guide for rosés of southern France. So I'm tasting through 1,000 southern French rosés. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that really have been struck by the vast range of color, including a red wine, which was declassified from being red because it was too pale. So it actually does work the other way. I am avid believer that colour does not matter when it comes to rosé. And I was talking about it. I have a very pale Southern French rosé. I have 2 Spanish rosés from the same producer, pale and dark. I have Tom, wave. His rosé, and Tom's going to talk a bit about his rosé. And of course, I have Nicola's rosé. Colour doesn't come into it. And I would also like to put forward my philosophical question, which we can debate or other people can question. How do you define a rosé? If you define alone, you could include reds. There is plenty of rosé which looks white. The colour alone is not the key. Do you include definition by vinification? And what method of vinification do we choose? I have my own ideas. So really, I do feel, hi editor, I do feel very, very strongly that colour should not come into it. And what we are looking at is the quality of the wine, whether it's orange, red, black, red, pink, white. So this all stemmed from a conversation with Nicola somewhere on social media about colour. I can't even remember where on social media, but somewhere. So.
Yep, lots to talk about. Nicola.
Oh, Sumi and I do rock and rosé. We should say, yes. Sumi and I do a podcast thing on Instagram, Sumi Rosé, at various times.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Nicola, you've got us all together. So
yeah, well, basically, you know, because of the name, I'm, you know, born and bred in the UK, came to Spain for 9 months, fell in love with the food and wine and the culture and the people. Those 9 months have become 24 years, 25 years.
Wow.
So I am in the region of Toro, tiny little medieval village surrounded by some of the world's oldest finds. You know, why would I go back? You know, the decision was very, very easy. And it was just, I think, destiny put me on this planet to help smaller producers and help farmers to give life and to help breed, you know, add a breath of fresh air and possibilities and future into their vineyards and into their livelihoods. And one Sunday, not very long ago, I was actually studying a torturous MBA, and I was a bit distracted by Facebook. So I got all my books, and it was corporate finance, believe it or not. And so I was just scamming through, you know, social media, and Tom Canavan had a post about the color of rosé, and Liz popped up on there, and we started chatting. And I'm really frustrated because we look after many small producers. My company is called Spanish Palate. And so we make our own wine from growers that I'm trying to help, but we're also trying to help small producers from all over Spain and export them all over the world. And I've become increasingly frustrated over the last couple of years with wonderful producers saying, Nicola, come and taste this. This is our rosé. This is how we've always made it, but it's really nice. And they've obviously made changes in terms of temperature control, etc. So they were making wonderful rosés, but darker color rosés. And so me and my team were traveling around the world showing these rosés, and people and importers across the world saying, can't deal with it, can't work with it, it won't sell. Why not? Because it's too dark. And so this, you know, created a massive amount of frustration, and started the conversation with Liz. And so I was thinking, the Botas de Barro, this is our first ever rosé that we've made. And I had this major conversation with our winemaker, and I'm saying, everybody wants this lighter color rosé. We need to make it lighter. And so we did tests and etc. and how to lighten the rosé of a Saunier rosé. And we were like, this is awful. Like, how can we be adding things to a wine just to make the color lighter? We're stripping. I mean, this rosé comes from, you know, 85-year-old Tinta de Toro, and we're going to put products in it to strip it of the color so it's easier to sell. And I'm like, no, no way. And so we kept it as the color it is. And so, you know, the whole point of this conversation is to help people, consumers, people that are, you know, everyday consumers that are not specialists in wine, help them understand when they go to a wine shop to not say, okay, I'm not buying that wine because it's not trendy in color, you know. And so that's basically what this is all about, so that we can help everybody to understand and enjoy all the colors of rosé, whatever those colors may be.
Fantastic. I mean, my name is Sumita, and Sumi, you can call me. Hello to all the new guests, Smriti, Albertina, Glenn. Hello, Edita. Fabulous. Good to see you, Howard, Tom, Vivian. So I have come from India. I moved here quite a few years back, but I lived in London before I had my children as well for a long time, which is how I got introduced to wines. And then I moved to Hong Kong. I was working in a bank, never had the luxury of, never understood what wines is, but it's in Hong Kong that I came across Burgundy and Bordeaux. So my introduction was actually reds. It's probably much, much later that I tasted rosé wine. So for me, I've started from a clean slate. For me, rosé was not just color. I would equate it to a wine that I used to like more because it was not full of tannins. I mean, I have always been a vegan vegetarian in my life, and I just found that rosé kind of fits into my palate. Color was not at all important. Color was great to look at, but in terms of pairing for me, and that's how Rock and Rosé started with Liz and myself. Literally, when I started my Master of Wine, I was just so confused how rosé wines, and Liz will laugh at me. My first message that I sent to Liz was, I'm studying for my Master of Wine, and can you tell me how Mateus is made? Because I had not tasted ever, and everyone used to laugh at me. Have you not had? I said, nope, never had. So that was my first introduction to understanding rosé wines, and I realize it is so much more complex than what it looks. It just, you know, as a consumer, you go, and I have gone and said, oh my God, the color is great, I should buy it. But there is a lot more to that. It's just not about looking at the color. It's about learning how to appreciate it. That's what got me going into rosé wines. And that's how we started our talk show, Rock and Rosé, with Liz as well. So Nicola, over to you. Botas de Barro, fabulous wine. It's a lovely color. I mean, I wouldn't call it pale, but it's not deep either, but it's got this very, very attractive pink. So could you kind of share with us what the winemakers' technical details was in terms of maceration and how to bring out the color?
Well, basically,
what was his aim? Was it to bring out the color, or it's just to bring out the grape, you know, the whole attributes?
Well, I have to admit that, like most great things in the world of wine and most great things in life, it was a complete accident, and it was kind of an afterthought. And so, because I've been here in Toro pretty much 23 years, and it was now time for me to make the best wine, the best red wine that I possibly could from Toro. So all through the summer, we were up and down the vineyards with my team. We selected a handful of some of the most amazing vineyards that producing something like less than 2,000 kilos per hectare, bush vines, ancient vines, all organically grown, because I really wanted to make that absolute best Toro wine that I could, red. And so off we went. We picked the grapes, but from some amazing vineyards, you know, threw them in the tank and left them overnight. And the next day we bled off a small percentage of the juice, right, to concentrate for our big Toro wine that's that I'm making in honor of a gentleman who's 99 years old. He's like the godfather of wine from Toro, and he lives above the cellar where Christopher Columbus took wine from in his first and second voyage of discovery to the Americas. You know, this is how important this guy is. So he's now coming up to 100 years old, and I'm like, this wine is going to be in honor of him. He's like my adopted grandfather. And so all of a sudden we were left with this tank with this most beautiful color and beautiful aromas of some grape juice. And we were like, oh, well, we have to make a beautiful rosé from this. And so, of course, we're starting from a red point of view, which is a major factor. When we're talking about rosés, you can either start with the intention of making a red and bleeding it off the juice, which you get more ripeness and more tanning, and it's a bigger flavored wine. Or you can start with the intention of making a rosé, which obviously starts incredibly different and produces a lot of different aromas. But the grape here is called Tinta de Toro, so it's our Tempranillo. So we're already starting with this really big flavored Tempranillo. And Tempranillo here in Toro has much thicker skin than any other Tempranillo. So, you know, that's a major point when we're talking about lighter color rosés. They want thinner skins. Whereas here we're talking a bigger grape, we're talking Tempranillo, but also the thickest type of Tempranillo, the thickest skin type of Tempranillo. So it was never going to be a light rosé. But I remember the wine, the whole winery, when we were bleeding off the tank, the winery just flooded with these most amazing aromas that was just absolutely delicious. And so we just fermented it, cold fermentation. After it was probably, I'm thinking, 8 hours of maceration on the skins, and that's the color, the natural color that it produces. So I think, you know, it's a bigger flavored rosé. And here in Toro, rosé is not actually an option, really, which is incredible, right? Because you would always think big red flavored regions in the summer, you know, it's really hot here, we get up to 40 degrees, you know, let's just switch to rosé while it's 40 degrees outside, but not so. So we're hoping to bring a breath of fresh air into rosé drinking here in the Toro region. So, well, hope you like it, guys. What do you think?
Fantastic, lots of cherries. In fact, in the morning it was cold here and I had left the room, all the windows, and I came back, you could smell all these lovely fruity notes in my office. Charles, I mean, it'll be great. I mean, Charles is one of the senior most persons here right now in the industry.
I think it's a lovely wine. It's got a really appealing rosé. I brought this sheet of white paper so that people could see. So this is, as Nicola says, it's not a deep rosé, but it's got just a beautiful pink color. And I contrast it with the bottle of wine I bought in a very good Portuguese wine shop, you see, which is frankly much paler in color. And I guess the guy who made it wanted to make a paler rosé, but Nicola's it looks beautiful. Now, I'm a sort of old-fashioned geezer, and I rather like a wine which says it's red to be red, a wine which says it's rosé to be pink. And I find some of these very, very pale rosés a bit disappointing because they're not pink. Having said that, you know, as someone said a little earlier, there are some very light colored red wines. And we then get into the whole sort of business of the Spanish Clarete, French Claret, this old style, which gave us our word claret in English, of course, which is an old style of very light red wine, light colored, which has a place in history. It has a place still nowadays. The Bordelais still call some of their darker rosés Claret, and the Spanish, not so much nowadays. You don't see Clarete so much as you used to, but they still have Claretes. I think mostly for the domestic market. It's a bit of a difficult concept for export. But I love this color. It's proper pink. It's great. Quite apart from the fact that it smells delicious. It's got jumping berries out of the glass.
And do you see a difference in what the consumer drinks in Europe vis-a-vis in the UK? Because in the UK, it's very difficult to get a deeper color. And I struggle and I have to go. We looked at Loire Valley and I had to really go and look for Anjou wines, sweet wines. It's just the variety is so limited in the UK. Is Europe a little bit more open-minded, obviously due to the traditional background?
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question yet. I've only been living here in Portugal since the end of December of last year. So I've only been a few months. And during lockdown, I haven't actually spent an awful lot of time out and about. So, you know, I bet a few hurried trips to the supermarket is all I've done. And this trip to a wine shop in Coimbra, which was the sort of the poshest wine shop I could find in Coimbra, that was very much out of the ordinary. So I don't really know the answer to that yet.
Right, right, right.
I look forward to finding out over the course of many years of standing around watching people buying wine in supermarkets or wine shops.
Fantastic.
Even buying the odd bottle myself.
Liz, what is your experience with?
Well, I just actually want to go back to claret, because editor will be able to, you know, claret in Czech Republic, Slovakia means it's also used for rosé, but necessarily indicating a darker rosé. And also I was talking to an American producer who I don't know if they'll be able to join us today. They were making a dark rosé that they wanted to call claretes. They have Spanish origin, and the US government said you can't call it claretes because Americans might be confused with claret. And so you end up with this, you know, to a certain extent, talking about the history of claret and claret for wine professionals is extremely useful. I had not anticipated that the consumer would find this mentally challenging. And I think one of the problems that we're looking at when we're looking at selling rosé, when you ask what do people drink, is, and I know this has been recorded, and Nicola, you feel free to cut this bit out, but I really do think that on average, the wine consumer world are pretty ignorant. However, you know, writing for over 30 years. Howard has been selling wine for over 30 years. Vivian's educating people about rosé, about wine. We can carry on till they carry us out in a box. We are only reaching people who are interested. This has been a discussion on Twitter. Felicity Carter was talking about this. The people who are interested in wine will read about it. That is less than 10%, I would say, of the consuming world. And that is a major, major problem, I think. We see it on all of the... Sorry, Howard, did you have something that you can contribute on that?
I was going to say that when I sort of first came into the wine world, the consumption was basically sort of 2 glasses of white for 1 glass of red and about a sort of thimbleful of rosé. And the sort of the rosé is fundamentally amongst the sort of the typical supermarket drinker came in were basically 2 wines. One was Matthias and the other was Rosé d'Anjou. Both characterized by sort of fairly sweet, sort of 20 to 30 grams of sugar in them. And because at that stage the white was all about Liebfraumilchhoch, Niersteiner Gumstal, equally white wines, relatively low alcohol with 25 to 30 grams of sugar in it. So this is where we started from.
And how did you work for Sainsbury's? You used to buy for Sainsbury's supermarket, didn't you?
Yeah.
So sort of commercially. So I wanted to sort of bring that back to the wine Nicola's done. And what's interesting is that we talked about the colour and how attractive the colour is. And right, so this one is Tom's wine and this one's Nicola's. So you can see that they're fairly similar in colour, but totally different, sorry, music, totally different in taste. So however much we can appreciate the colour, I know from having put together flights of rosé for the past week, it's impossible to say this darker rosé is going to be more gastronomic, is going to be drier, is going to have a bit of tannin, is going to be fruitier. Again, where we are not explaining very much on the label. You know, if I look at the wines, just looking at the label, the amount of information as to what is in the bottle, other than the colour, is really lacking. What have I had? I've had back labels. This rosé is good with pasta. I'm sorry, you know, pasta, you know, that can go with anything. We had one rosé recommended to be drunk with a tin of sardines, which has got my son, who's my co-taster, fantastically excited. He said, yeah, you know, this is obviously going to be a rosé with enough guts to go with a tin of sardines. And it's going to get earmarked even if the rosé is dreadful, but it's a winemaker with the confidence to say, this is a rosé with character. And for me, your rosé is, Nicola, is very much along the Claretes style, in that it's an extremely serious rosé. It's got enough tannin from those thick skins coming through that it's almost a summer red, as opposed to what we call in the south of France a swimming pool rosé, which is off dry. Enough sugar that you can put ice cubes in. You wouldn't want to put ice cubes in this. You wouldn't want to serve it chilled, but it has that lovely seriousness, incredibly long acidity, very, very fresh. That slight twist of tannic structure and lots of fruit. And if I just wrote that description, you would all be going, it's a light red wine.
And I guess that
apart from the fact you'll then say, but it looks like a rosé.
And I guess this is where the consumer needs to be educated also, behind some of the key wine styles that make it different. I think we all need to, I guess Tom has done pretty much a lot of work on his wine, but the color looks exactly same, maybe different in terms of his winemaking style as opposed to Nicola's wine, and be good for consumers to know. I mean, Liz, what is, if you or Tom want to talk about the winemaking style for Paso Primero, that'll be useful.
Sorry,
the winemaking behind Paso Primero.
Tom,
over to you. So just to introduce, another one, I do things other than spend time on social media, I assure you all. But Tom got in touch with me. We again were talking about colour. And he said, do you want to taste my rosé? And I've never been known to say no to an offer to taste rosé. And Tom, do you want to explain your dark rosé?
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot to explain, I suppose. I'm Tom, the winemaker for Paso Primero. I'm stuck in Shrewsbury at the moment, but I make all my wines in Somontano, so in the Pyrenees, northern Spain. The rosé, Rosado, as we call it. My food pick, by the way, is a packet of bacon frazzles. So I will hang my hat on that any day of the week. If you want specifics, the cheaper this packet of bacon frazzles, the better. That sweet barbecue flavour with that rosé is sensational. That will be going on the bottles eventually. It got us into the Guardian, so that was quite successful for us last year. The old colour conundrum. I mean, rosé does suffer a few things, doesn't it? It's the most genderized, most seasonal wine in the world. And then you add in this colour problem, which I fell into the trap big time. I mean, I've been making wine in Somontano for about 6 years now. And
you were at Plumpton, that's right, isn't it? You studied at Plumpton.
Lived in New Zealand for 2 years in Hawke's Bay. Lived in Canada, making wine in Niagara for 3 years. Building towards my own place, my own attempts. I mean, we're begging, stealing and borrowing our way in this trade. I do not have a family winery or a load of money behind me. We are renting space, borrowing everything we can along the way to get our wines to market. Started with red wine, which is why we went to Spain in the first place. Year one red wine. Year two, a red wine and a white wine. Year three, we started experimenting with the trilogy and making the rosé. And our main market is the UK, and we fell into the trap of what was trendy and trying to make a wine to suit the trend. And for 2 vintages running, we made Provence style rosés, pulled every trick in the book we could to try and get the color right and make this super light, fresh wine. And they just kept collapsing on us. They'd look great through the early stages of fermentation, and then just towards the end of ferment or just after ferment, they just fall apart. They would just not hold themselves together at all. And so we had, in the summer of 2019, we had a meetup. We stayed in the hills. I took a case of wine from England. We collected a couple of cases of rosés from around Spain, and went and had a weekend of just sitting with the team in Spain and drinking all the rosés and seeing what are we doing wrong. And we realized that we should just make the right wine for the region we're in. Trying to make something, we don't make champagne in Somontano. Why should I be trying to make Provence rosés there? And so we said, the team in Spain love this because it's turned out to be a really successful story, and they're the ones that convinced me to do it. So I have to eat eat my cake and have my cake and eat it, or whatever the expression I'm looking for is. But we set off, we'll make a white, we'll use our red grapes, Merlot, Tempranillo, and we'll make it in our white wine style. So we filled the grape, and that filled the press with the grapes, and that was all the skin contact we had. We pressed it as soon as it was full. There is no issue with color in Somontano. So, we knew we were going to get a deep enough color off it. And we treated it like it was our top end Chardonnay. And that was the approach, where we get enough body, enough weight, and also hold on to the aromatics that we wanted. It came out better than we hoped, but I knew it was going to be a real struggle to sell in the UK market. We launched it in December 2019 to muted success. I mean, it was a bad time to launch rosé, but it's Christmas, so we had trilogy packs to send out. And then the only good thing about the pandemic was in April of 2020, all of the UK wine writers were stuck at home in the middle of a heat wave, and they had nothing else to do apart from talk about rosés. So we fired off our deep dark rosé, and it appeared we were the only people doing so. And with all the barbecues firing up and everything else, we found a niche, we found our role, and it was a bigger, weightier, more, I hate using the word serious, because all wines are serious, aren't they? But, it was able to handle flavor a little bit more than some other rosés that were available. And it just took off for us. It was a big success. I mean, I'm a small producer, we're 3,000 cases a year maximum at the moment. But it outsold our red wine. It was the first time any wine did so. And it proved to me that what we should always do as winemakers is make the right wine for where we're from, and leave other styles to other people. Don't fall into the trap of trends, but stick to your guns. And it's worked for us. I mean, unfortunately, the pandemic's meant we haven't sold as much as we wanted to in trades and things like that. But we've worked really hard to start with our 2020s, drop the alcohol, because that is a killer for us from Somontano. We're really struggling with that. That's far worse than our color. But on the whole, I'm really chuffed with it, and I'm glad I made the mistakes, because it helped me find the resolution.
So just to describe this, I mean, this has very much the same acidity as Nicola's wine. I guess that Tempranillo acidity, but it's much fruitier, much juicier. It doesn't have the claretes type of tannin. It's a very easy rosé to drink. It's just so much fruit coming through with that acidity. Slightly more orange. I need a bit of white paper.
Trying to get away from that.
So this is 2019. But if you had a black glass, tasting in a black glass, it is rosé, or red. It has bucketfuls of red fruit, which is really, really interesting.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll take that to the bank.
a lot of the advances in the making of rosé have been because more and more people are understanding how to make white wine well, and thus rosé wine well. I can remember one evening I was staying with some very dear friends in Rioja, and our friend said, right, I want to take you to a very traditional bodega. It's in a town just south of Logroño, a town called Villa Mediana, which is slightly up in the hills. And we went down there, and there was this hill with chimneys coming out of it. And in this hill, there were all these little bodegas. And it was a Friday evening, and everyone had finished their working week, and they were out to have fun. And our friend Miguel took us inside one of these, and it was quite obvious that he was well known and a frequent visitor. And everyone greeted him, and by extension us. And we started drinking. And the wines in this little place were rustic. And they were, the whites were yellow, the rosados were sort of orange, and the reds were thumping. And they were terrifying. I mean, they were probably, I mean, I think their definition of a good wine was one that started at 15% alcohol because it did the job faster, something with less. But, you know, since then, so much has been learned by wine producers all over the world that everyone now has access to someone who knows how to make wine. It may not be a member of the family if you're a particular grower, it may be a consultant, but there are all these enthusiastic young kids who've been through enology studies at the local university who know how to do it. They know the biochemistry, they know how to handle cool fermentation, they know why to do what to do. And there's no reason to make those thumping old horrors any longer. And the result is that you can really make what you want to make. But in somewhere like Toro, where you have these wonderful old vines capable of making huge reds, but handled well, as the modern generation of winemakers in Toro does, can make these wonderful, intense, but elegant reds, you're not going to be making a sort of namby-pamby rosé out of those vines. It would be not honoring the vineyard. And we all get told, you know, the wine is made in the vineyard. If you've got these fabulous old vines, you can't just make some namby-pamby little pale pink thing. You've got to make something which reflects the vines and the grapes that those vines grow.
Absolutely, Charles. I mean, nobody would ever describe Toro's namby-pamby, right? This is, you know, but I'm from Yorkshire, and so, you know, we're made of stronger stuff as well, you know. Just coming back to what Tom was saying, it really, and Charles as well, it really is about making the right wine for your terroir. You know, the level of sunshine that we have in Spain is not the same as the foot of the Pyrenees in colder climates, you know. And we can't, like Tom was saying, we can't make champagne in Toro. You know, why would we? And so looking and enjoying the diversity of wine and the different regions and the history and the culture all makes up what each region is. And I think that is something that we so have to celebrate, and which is why this conversation came about, because I really want to start this whole conversation in Spain of saying, look, if you have high yielding garnacha from La Mancha, and you don't have to strip your wine of flavor to make lighter colored rosés, go for it. You know, go for it and ride the wave and give the consumer what it wants. But let's not really try and put a square key through a round hole. And let's really come together and communicate and rejoice in our color, you know. One other thing that Tom said is, I mean, the way that you can have lesser color in your rosé, you can either go to a different region, you can change your varietal, you can increase your yields. So the more yields, more production leads to eventually less polyphenol concentration, thinner skins, you have less skin to pulp. All of this makes a massive difference in terms of color. You can also pick earlier, but if you're picking earlier, then you're also going to get less ripeness and more green tones. So then it's all about balance. It's like, do you want to give up that ripeness or not? And then you can also ferment at cooler temperatures, and you can do direct press, which is what Tom has done. And after our experience with Botas de Barro, we're going to do in 2021, we're going to do an old vine direct press. I want to see how that comes out rather than the Saunier. I might do both and just see, you know, old vine, direct press, cool fermentation. We were going to do
I don't know.
I know.
I can understand that. Sorry to interrupt. The trend towards direct press, and I think Editor, your rosé's direct press. So Editor makes a paler rosé in Slovakia, and if I can come back to you later. But I was going to say, the Tempranillo Senier that you've done why would you do direct press? The Saignée is just beautiful with it. It's got the
just want to
structure
have a
that
taste.
backs up their
Taste.
fruit. I know, but
Taste both
you
of
know,
them.
it's
See what happens.
what I find interesting is, and I'm sorry, because I get really quite passionate about this, and then you have to tell me to shut up or block me out or something. Right, so Sumi and I are going to be doing an Instagram I Love Rock and Rosé bigger tasting on the Protos wines, which will go into much more detail. But this is one vineyard from Cigales. That's their initial vintage. So they've got the same grapes. They've got the darker one for the natives, and they've got the paler one for export. And I'm thinking that one is probably more direct press. And it is fascinating, just when they do the direct press, you don't always get that beautiful fruit concentration in quite the same way. You're getting the juice, but you're not getting that fruit flavor from the skin getting on Saignée that you get in a lot of other wines. And then people say, yeah, but I'm trying it because it gets a paler color. So I'll be fascinated to see what the difference is and how you feel about the two when you've done it.
I guess the point when you do the Saignée method, there is the time with the fruit and the juice will yield a lot more of flavor precursors, which in Provence they are now doing with the stabulation technique. So they avoid the color and then they bring out through cooling of the wines. Oh my God, it's like, you know, it's like trying to push someone away and then pull them back towards you rather than just let them come. I think some things which are allowed to happen naturally should just happen naturally. And I guess that's the point Charles was also making. Why make things more complicated when you can actually, when you have a good product on it, probably Nicola, you and Tom are doing, you can keep refining on that. But I mean, I agree, direct pressing may be good for comparison, just for you to see how it goes, but don't give up on the same method.
It's beautiful.
I think Glenn also does, Glenn and Kirsten Tracy, who are with us here, they also do a couple of rosés, darker style, and I think they're pretty keen and quite steadfast, and they want to keep that going, and they want to bring it out. And I guess there is an element of polyphenol that comes along with the color that brings a natural form of stability to the wine and more flavors to it. I have with me a, which I bought from the UK, Waitrose. It's available, the Flor de Muga, which is their step up from their Rosado wine. And I actually thought this was, I didn't see when I was buying it. When I came back home, I realized, oh gosh, this is their Grenache, but you know, they have now gone for high altitude, 600 meters high, old vines. So as Nicola, you said, they have gone in for picking quality fruit, and then they have made the wines, which has come out to be pale, but you know, they have used that as the basis and then further gone.
It also has a bit of oak, right, Sumi?
That has got oak, yeah, absolutely. So their level of adding complexity is through and quality is through these parameters of old vines selection, and then using kind of micro vinification. So they've used 500 liters of vats to put it forward. But I guess that is the style that did not probably didn't, because I bought it on sale for 16 pounds, and I'm amazed that I should have bought. I only have 2 bottles. I think I should have got like more of this. So not necessarily color, you know, color and quality. You can get quality with both wines. I think it is coming out with what the grape brings to you. I think that's more important, and then using the grape and the terroir. And Tom said also the region, what it produces. I mean, if your region is making a grape that is, and Nicola, yours makes thick-skinned grapes, get the juice, get the thiols out of it and bring it out, because that is what it is meant for. The color is kind of a supplementary attribute to it all, right? Charles, I mean, you have a lovely pale Portuguese wine.
Well, yes, I went out specifically looking for a wine that came from a good winemaker that was paler in color. So I've just got my bit of white paper here, and I'm going to try and hold it up so you can see the color of, color of those wines without pouring it all over my computer keyboard, which would be a pity. So balancing these two is I think going to be too much of a problem. But you can see just against the white wall in the background. This is Nicola's in my left hand. and this is the Portuguese Mondoiro. It is a complete, there is a year difference. Nicholas is 2020, this is 2019. And that, of course, you have to take into account as well. I don't know what this Portuguese one would have been a year younger. It might have been slightly less orangey in color, but the smell is much less fruity than Nicholas, actually. It's much more savory. And the guy who made it, who's a very characterful, you might say opinionated Portuguese producer called José Bento dos Santos. He's fascinated by Syrah. Here he is in Portugal with all these wonderful Portuguese grapes. And what he loves is Syrah and a white Viognier. So this is actually a pure Syrah rosé. And it's really savory. I mean, he says it's gastronomic. And when José says something is gastronomic, I listen to him because he's one of the best non-professional chefs I have ever met. He is a sensational chef. And so this is made, I think, to go with so many different things. And it is very annoying when you see on the back of a wine label that this is really good with fish and meat and chicken and cheese and salads and pasta. And you think, you know, come on, pull the other one.
And
good with
masala
pasta.
as well.
Pasta flavored with what? Pasta tastes of very little, even if it's got spinach through it or tomatoes through it. You know, is it marisco? Is it a hearty stew of oxtail, or you know, what is it? So pasta by itself, good with pasta, stupid. But this is a lovely sort of savory. It's not terribly fruity. It's got this savory, umami kind of flavor to it. Fabulous acidity. You know, frankly, I don't care what color this wine is. It's a very good wine. I have to say, sometimes when I was judging at the International Wine Challenge, we used to find it really quite difficult to find rosés we thought were really good enough to get gold medals. This is a sensational wine. You know, it could have been a sensational white or red. It happens to be a sort of pale orangey pink.
Yeah.
But I think that's the important thing. And the question that I would like to put to Liz is, why is it that this incredible fashion for very pale rosé started, it seems to me, principally in Provence? Why?
It's actually, I mean, it's sort of a fairly easy response in that until the late 1980s, rosé was the accidental bleeding off from red wine to concentrate the red wine. I have leaflets from the 1980s that talk about the bloody wine because they translated Saignée and it's come out as just the bloody wine. And they were incredibly coarse. I remember selling rosé, Provence rosé, in the 80s, and I was a child prodigy. And they would last until September. They died. They were clumsy. They were clunky. The grapes had been harvested for the red wine, so they lacked acidity. They really were your original gutsy, herbal, good with barbecue, drink enough, you won't notice you've drunk it stuff. And then this is why we got a bit upset with the direct press. And then they started doing the direct pressing to get much more gentle fruit, harvesting earlier, making it expressly for rosé. And they discovered that one of the key ways to distinguish between the two different sorts of rosé was one was slightly paler than the darker rustic one. And the paler started mental association of it is more elegant, it is fresher, it is cleaner. And even 15 years ago, even then, Provence rosé was still a lot darker than it is now. And I think a lot of it is just a sort of growing trend. So as far as I can see, Provence rosé visually indicated that they were of a high quality because they were paler than rosés from around the world. And as rosés from around the world became paler to show they were of good quality, Provence said, well, we've got to show we're even better quality. We will be paler than everyone else. And so it just got paler and paler and paler. You cannot get any paler than they are now. I mean, we get a lineup of water, white, pink wines.
I find it difficult to write the color when it actually looks, some of them look like a white wine. And
well, exactly. I mean, I have put white wines in a lineup and they're much yellower than a very, very pale rosé. But then you've got key things. You've got 2010, the start of Instagram. And those photos came out, more and more photos, pale pink, blue sea, classic. 2016, the Pantone Millennial Pink colour was introduced to their range. So there's this sort of obsession with this colour pink, this paler and paler pink. Proof of quality, proof of freshness. Howard, you?
No, the comment I was going to make is actually already been raised. That I remember the first had a Burgundy rosé, and I asked the winemaker how they made it. He said, "Well, it's the stuff that we run off the red in the poor years to actually concentrate the red." I mean, so rosé was a accidental byproduct, and as a consequence, it was never there particularly sort of attractive. It was quite, as you say, fairly rustic and lots of sort of tannins, but with not much acidity, but had lots of red fruit character. But I mean, I remember the first time I actually tasted Tavel, which is probably taking it to the extreme. That was quite a shock.
Yeah, I get. Yeah. The color now goes, you know, to making rosé as distinct as it is to make only a rosé wine, right? Don't make it an off product of a red wine, and grow grapes for making a rosé wine, which is what Nicola was also saying. Harvest times, picking times are becoming crucial.
And don't forget, in Provence, you can add white grapes. So you have to have I think the maximum is 20% of what is grown is white. It's not what goes into the wine, it's 20% what's in yield. So I do know of a number of top Southern French rosés, and I'm talking top, that have up to 40% white grapes in their rosé.
Wow, that is really stretching what I thought was a European rule, that rosé has to be made out of red grapes.
Rosé has to be made with red and white grapes blended before fermentation.
Gosh.
Do you know, there's an interesting thing. Traditionally, old vines that belong to smaller families, and Tom, you will find this, and you'll have found this in Somontano, the vineyards that we hired for our top red wines, they've all got tiny production, a small percentage of white grapes blended in with them, because each parcel of land belonged to a family. So they would grow the red grapes principally, but they would all be interlinked with and intertwined with a little bit of white grapes. And so a lot of the producers actually just go through, and I like the idea of what's grown together over the last 80 years, let's keep together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know? So in one of our vineyards for Alba de Gildo, for the top red, we have it's 2.5 hectares, of which about 0.2 hectares are white grapes, unidentified white grapes. And I have a producer from Ribel del Duero. They're one of the co-ops, and they have the oldest vines, or the largest percentage of older vines under one roof than any other producers in Ribel del Duero. And I was talking to them about this talk the other day, and like yours, Protos, they have the sort of the traditional Saunier darker rosé, but then they brought out this beautiful, more premium rosé. This is for the local market, which it's like glugged on a daily basis in large quantities. And God forbid anybody changing this wine for their locals. They would be distraught at having to drink this. And this is now it's Tempranillo Tinto del País with Albillo. And so in these vineyards as well, they're like, well, this is Albillo has been grown in these vineyards for 80, 90, 100 years old. So let's just throw it all in together and ferment it. And that's how this came out. So I think the idea of the red and the white blend is really nice, and keeping Mother Nature together, because you've got the terroir is obviously having an effect over 100 years on each of those grapes. And the result, I just think, is really nice.
Fantastic. I think we're running out of time. Just a quick question and your views, Liz and Charles. What do producers do going forward? Do they do this, light pale colored rosé and a darker one for their market, or do they decide that this is my philosophy, this is my style, I'm just going to go with this one bit? What is the future for this? Or should we just leave it to the market to decide? We do need to change consumer perception as well in this, don't we?
Personally, I think it's going to be, I think this was happening before COVID, and I think it's going to increase in that I think we're going to see a big split in rosé production. We're going to get your generic Kylie Minogue in a can, great, easy quaffing, non-offensive rosé, which is what the majority of people will be wanting. And then you've got people like Editor, Glenn, Tom, Nicola, who are actually going, you know what, we're going to, Editor, I think you did something different with your rosé this year. You had more lees aging to make it slightly more complex. Glenn's been reverting back to more gastronomic rosé on his site. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think once restaurants reopen, we're going to return. There are a number of producers. I was speaking to one in New Zealand who was saying, we just work with a couple of restaurants with the sommeliers. We work with the sommeliers, we get them to create dishes that will go with our rosé, so that we'll have some restaurants that won't have 2 rosés on the list, which are always the same rosés. It's so boring. And we are going to get even the 5 rosés that I have here, but totally different dishes. It's not rosé with one thing. And I think we're going to build up that range of complexity of wines. I know there is a glass ceiling on price, but this past month I have been shocked with the number of producers producing their bog standard pale pink generic money earning rosé, and then they've sent their special cuvee. I would like to see far more rosés in dark bottles. Not because it's hiding the color, but we've got the light strike problem. And I think it would indicate a seriousness that this is not the color that you're buying, but this is the seriousness of the wine. That's my bit.
I think that's a very interesting point about colored bottles, because light strike is a real problem. It really is a problem. And clear glass bottles, and that is traditionally what rosé has always been sold in, as far as I've been aware. And you can see the color, and that's great. But maybe that's the answer, Liz. Maybe the answer is that you sell it in a dark glass bottle. It protects the wine more from light strike, and people don't know what the color is until they pull the cork and pour it out. And if it's a bottle which has got, they've had a recommendation because of a journalist's write-up or because a friend said this is good, they've had a recommendation, this is a good wine, go and buy it. And then they are not so obsessed by color, because they don't know what the color is until they've got the wine in the glass.
Absolutely. I guess sometimes you have to make a drastic decision from the producer point of view. Glenn, I think your bottles are dark, right? Your rosé wines?
We pushed very hard with our other members of our team, because we're the production. My wife and I are the production team, and then we have the other side, which is sort of the finance and marketing team. We pushed very, very hard to have green glass bottles for our rosé, but the market at this point is just not willing to accept that much change. So we would hope to be able to do it in the future, but just not. We don't have the gravitas as a producer yet to do that. We can't just push it down people's throats.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I guess we have.
So Howard's got a bottle. What's your bottle, Howard?
This is actually a red wine, but it sort of come from not far away from where Charles is. It's actually a Lisboa. But I mean, this is actually a really, it's a really dark sort of green-brown bottle. And
is that a rosé?
no, it was
Red.
actually a red. It was actually a serious red inside it.
Right.
But no, what I was going to say is that it was when Gert was at Marks and Spencer's, he put all their rosés into green bottles. But wearing my beer hat now, green glass, yes, does give a bit more protection than the sort of white glass, but it's not until you really get into amber glass that you get sort of a significant increase in the protection against light strike, which obviously affects beer as much as it does wine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess, so yeah, I mean, just to bring everything to a conclusion, I think we've had some very interesting discussion about colors, ranging from colors to bottle issues. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think in a nutshell, bring out what your grape has, the grape attributes most important, bring out the terroir of your wine, irrespective of the color, bring out your wine. I think that's very important for the consumers to know, because the consumers will just keep repeating what they like, but I think it's for us as producers and for the wine trade to show them, look, there is more variety, open your eyes. And I think as people graduate, they will learn to appreciate complexities in wine. Well, there is complexity in a pale wine, there is complexity with deeper colored rosé wine as well. I think so. The fact is that you just cannot really say that any of them is interrelated. Producers should not go for making it light. They need to bring out what their style is, what they are believing in. And I think it's also good to experiment. And as Nicola said, trying out different things if it is within the capacity to see what brings the best balance for your wines. And yeah, bottle color, the color of the bottle also, I think it's sometimes good to just do kind of literally blind tasting, put it in a darker color, and, you know, let the consumer decide based on that. And, you know, yes, Liz, you had mentioned about doing completely blind tasting with our eyes closed. I think that's what we need to do now to the world, to have a rosé tasting.
Just to go back to that, Brad from Night Timber, when he's blending his sparkling rosé, does it in black glasses.
Yeah.
Because he actually wants his rosé, sparkling rosé, to taste different to his sparkling white. He wants that red fruit character. Whereas a lot of southern Grenache-based rosés have a lot of white fruit. So having the dark glasses is good, but just to remember that not all rosés have red fruit. Some of them have peachy white fruit as well. But yeah, but this is on my to-do list to get my black glasses.
Oh, Vivian, do you have black glasses?
I don't have black glasses, but I like the color of dark bottles because I think people buy with their eyes. And if they can't see the color, then they're not going to be inhibited by the color on the bottle.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you can see this. I was judging rosés last week, and that was a flight of 4 different rosés. Yeah, totally different colors. And yet the colors did not express the flavors of the wines. So I'm with Liz, in that I don't think the color matters. It's what you get inside your mouth. So the black, whether you use black glasses, whether you use dark bottles, I think that's a much better way for the consumer to understand. You know, when I'm teaching, you know, at one end of the pendulum, I've got 17, 18-year-olds loving Blossom Hill White Zin. And that's still a big market for people. And as the palate becomes more sophisticated, then I think their tastes change. I mean, we're sophisticated wine drinkers here. We're not talking about the young kids and how they start drinking. And then we've got to move them from the white zins to what we enjoy. And that is a really tough job, particularly if you can see the wines and see the colors.
Yeah, and
so I think the dark bottle's better.
Completely agree. And I think that the Generation Z is pretty open, I think, about different colors. They are more into sensual appeal of what they feel and whether it gives them the social pleasure. I personally don't think that they are into particular colors as such. They want to hear stories. And I think that's more important for the producer to bring out his or her or their story. What is it that, why did you make a wine of this character, of this style? And yeah, I mean, color then becomes completely secondary to all of that, basically. So yeah, Nicola, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, or do you all agree with this conclusion?
I think absolutely, and I think that, like Liz was saying, we make wine. The world of wine exists to give pleasure, and why we are honored enough and lucky enough to make it our life and our lifestyle. Wine, for the majority of people, is something that they go to and enjoy without much thought after they've done the whole day's work. And that's why the wine industry exists, and that's who we should be making wine for. And I really think of my many experiences drinking with, I mean, I'm from Yorkshire. I know about people that don't know anything about wine because my family didn't know anything about wine until I came to Toro. And people want guidance, and they want something nice in their hand, and whether it be darker or lighter, people just want something nice and enjoyable to sit and enjoy. They're not necessarily, they don't want to have to read a book to get the full pleasure of a glass. And so hopefully through this tasting, we can reach out to a whole bunch of consumers all over the world and just say, guys, just go experiment, go to your wine shop, go to your supermarket, wherever you want to buy your wine. Just try and try and try, and don't be blinded by the color, and just enjoy wine. And that's what it's all about, really, for us.
Howard?
I was going to say, we've been talking about color, but as Vivian mentioned, the sort of the white zins of this world, the white Moscatos or the pink Moscatos. I say my daughter, key example. I mean, she's in her late 30s now. The little person you saw is her youngest daughter, and but she makes no fuss about it. She describes her wine taste as princess juice. It is the sweet pink stuff, and there is a massive market for the sweet pinks. I mean, the Americans are sort of effectively sort of driven this market with the white zins. So yeah, their rosé encapsulates such a sort of a massive range of styles of wine. So it really is a case of sort of what you sort of choosing, so targeting your wine at a particular market. Nobody can make everything for everybody. Exactly. And just as a closing comment for Nicola, I have a bit of history with Toro. Back when it was first became a DO, so that's what, 35. Yeah, so I was there, I think, in probably 88, and I was working with a winery there, and we produced this massive Tinta de Toro, and I think it won the Red Wine of the Year award at the IWC. It was amazing wine.
I know which one that was.
I can't remember. What it was what?
A little thought in closing. I agree entirely, Sumi, with what you said, but I would say about almost all wine. If you suddenly realize you're actually possibly more interested in the flavor of wine than you thought you might be, other than just something wet to put in the glass, which gave you a mildly pleasant sensation, be adventurous. Try something you haven't tried before. You know, it could be a darker colored rosé, it could be a paler red, but just don't be too hidebound. Don't get in too much of a rut. Just experiment a bit. The wonder of wine is its variety. And there are so many different types of wine. Just go with the flow and take some advice, take some thoughts of other friends who use opinions you respect, and try something new.
Always a good way to learn about new grapes, new regions as well. Fantastic. Well, are we done?
Very quickly, a pink that I got by mistake. The biggest accident of the lot. Suddenly got lots of complaints on this was the early days of screw caps. I'd put this, it was a French Sauvignon Blanc into a screw cap bottle, and suddenly had lots of complaints. This wine's pink. Tastes delicious, but it's pink. Literally, it was one of these redox potential things that Sauvignon Blanc does have some red characters there. If you get the oxidation level just wrong, it did actually turn pink in the bottles.
Oops.
Anyway, amusing anecdote.
Wow.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Nicola, for having us all over. And
Thank you so much.
fabulous
everybody.
session.
Thank you.
Lot to take away from here. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Good to talk to you guys. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.